We kick off hour number 2 with a good buddy of the program, Drew DeArmond, host of the Talking Ball Show up in Huntsville at 97.7 The Zone, and does a terrific job covering sports and recruiting, and we're going to get into both of those subjects. Good morning, Drew.
Morning, Gary. How are you doing this morning, sir?
Very well, my friend, and I'm really excited to talk to you because I want to get the scoop on, what we had last night there in the Rocket City. J.L. Johnson versus Robert E. Lee. Johnson wins 63-61. Of course, we know about John Petty, the junior swing player for Johnson, being recruited by Alabama. I think Antoine Petway, Bob Simon, and Avery Johnson were all there. The game was sold out. I don't know that I've ever seen that for a regular season high school basketball game. What was that like last night?
Well, as I tweeted this morning in the wee hours, Gary, it was probably, in hindsight, the most electric atmosphere that I've ever witnessed and been a part of in high school basketball. I've been doing this a long time as far as going to games, and it was probably the best environment I've ever seen and the best game. It was for the first time they played in Probst Arena, which is at the Von Braun Center, and it holds around 6,000 people now in the reconfiguration. At one time it was over 7, but it holds for basketball. It holds about They added it at 5,500. They sold everything. I think there was about 6,000 people there last night, but it was standing room only. I got there right before tip-off. I was just amazed. Took a picture, of the crowd, and it was an electric environment. And then the game was a rematch of the Huntsville Times Classic final played at Huntsville High School, my alma mater, on December the 30th. That game was nearly 3,000 people and sold out an hour before the tip-off. But this was on another level. This was, twice that, more than twice that. And for a regular season game, it was just amazing. And it was, of course, the last game between the two rivals. Johnson will close at the end of this spring school year, and Jemison High School will open. But it was just a fitting final chapter, and went down to the very last play. It was a chaotic last minute. Johnson tried to hold the basketball and missed a shot. Lee went down, missed the driving layup. Johnson got a run out, laid it in, and then Lee ran the basketball back up the floor with Jack Doss trying to call timeout. The officials didn't see him, and that they couldn't hear anything. It was so loud. And Lee shot a 3 at the buzzer that was no good, and it was just a tremendous basketball game. As I tweeted, if both those teams play with the passion and intensity they played with last night, Lee will win 6A and Johnson will win 5A. But it was just a magical night to be a part of. And as you said, Avery Johnson was there. The game was televised, but it will be tape delayed. He did speak with their their crew at halftime of the game. And then Bob Simon, the associate head coach, is there. I met him. Very nice. The guy has done a tremendous job at the time. Antoine Petway, who, of course, I was fortunate enough to work with in his 1 year at the Huntsville Flight, the NBDL. I've known Antoine for a long time, and he was there also. So it was just an electric night for high school basketball, and good to see the Alabama staff out in full force.
Yeah, knowing Jack Doss, I'm just happy for him and his team that he didn't run out there and tackle one of those officials when they wouldn't give him a timeout, because that probably would have resulted in a technical foul. But as you said, what a game. I wasn't there, but just reading the accounts, it was tight the whole way, back and forth. And Johnson, as you said, closing at the end of the school year, gets the victory by 2 over Lee. Petty, 17 points and 13 rebounds. Clearly, he's the focal point in this game, even though there are other talented players. I want to ask you about him. I've seen him last couple of years in Birmingham at the state tournament, still just a junior. Freakish athletic ability. He's still being refined as a basketball player, although playing for Jack Doss, you won't get much better coaching than that at the high school level. How good can this young man be, and what are Alabama's chances of ultimately signing him?
Well, I got to tell you, too, just real quickly on that, too, Gary. What I'll give Lehigh credit for is when they played Johnson back on December the 30th, they were, they tried to do too much. I thought they were a team that just did not play with. They didn't play with a lot of poise. They were helter skelter. Everyone tried to make a spectacular play. Last night they were calm, poised, and I thought they played as well as they can play. For the 32 minutes, and they were up 10 in the third quarter, and going into the latter stages. Johnson made a huge 10-0 run in 2 minutes to tie it, and then, as you said, it was back and forth the rest of the game. And John Petty was tremendous. He had 17 points and 13 rebounds, and he had to be, because one of Johnson's best players, Justin Hopkins, he and John Petty are basically Batman and Superman. And, Justin had a nice first half and then had a severe cut over his lip in the third quarter. They patched him up, but he bled so much that his jersey was saturated. They didn't have an extra uniform, so he could not come back in the game the last quarter and a half. So Johnson had to play without him. So John kind of had to take it to the next level.
My goodness.
He played with a lot of energy, a lot of passion, and I thought he played a tremendous basketball game. As you already said, 17 points, 13 rebounds, had 4 block shots, had a goaltend late that tied it at 61. It was still a great effort play. And to me, as you said, he's still a little bit unrefined, working on his jump shot. He's gotten better with it, though. He's got springs for legs. He's not as strong right now as the Josh Langford is, who's a full from Madison Academy, but he has a chance to be that level of player. I talked to Jack Doss about it last night. We're going to have the audio on my show, but I'll tell you this. I said, Coach, just tell me about John Petty and his performance. 17 points, 13 rebounds, stepping up with the absence of Justin Hopkins. He said, well, I'll tell you this, Drew. He's the best player in America. And if there's a better basketball player in this state, if there's someone else going to be Mr. Basketball, then I'm Miss America.
Wow. How about that? All right, my second part of my question, ultimately, and I know for Avery Johnson to take this Alabama program where he wants to take it, getting guys like John Petty is critical, national caliber players that are from the state of Alabama. I know there's a lot of time left for him to be recruited, but how good a chance does Alabama have, do you think, with John Petty?
I think very, very good. Of course, there's always the Kentucky angle, had people telling me that last night. Well, I still think he'll go to Kentucky, but as I told someone, the Kentucky wasn't there last night. Alabama has been there around every corner, and then Avery Johnson sending almost the entire coaching staff. Only Scott Fospickle, who's already been to see him, who was there with Antoine Petway at the Uncle Tom's Classic final, was not there. Antoine Petway has a very good rapport with their entire coaching staff, and I think Avery Johnson does as well. I think it is a complete 180 from the previous regimen, and I think they're doing all they can to develop a relationship with his mother and realize that he can stay home and play. And I think Alabama finishing strong this year and trying to reach postseason play would be big. And then, of course, seeing what Avery Johnson can do to add a couple of post players in the late signing period. And then the roster next year should be dramatically different. I think I told someone late last night, based upon, what you're hearing and what you see with who they're going to sign, and Terrence Ferguson's going to sign with Alabama, I believe it's an NCAA tournament team next year, Gary. And if so, John Petty will sign more than likely in November, but what if he does wait till the spring? I still think with the groundwork that's being laid that Alabama has a very good chance at John Petty, and I think Avery Johnson knows it, and that's why they're being as aggressive as they are.
Absolutely. So you don't think what happened with Trevor Lacey, who played for Jack Doss, obviously that was under a previous coaching staff. You don't think that Coach Doss harbors any ill will toward Alabama with that situation, and that'll affect the recruitment of Petty?
Not at all.
Good.
Zero.
Good. All right, let's move on from basketball now to football. National Signing Days this coming Wednesday. Alabama, usually by this time, is just waiting on 2 or 3 or 4 guys. This year, Drew, they're waiting on 8, 9, maybe as many as 10. In good position with a lot of those guys. But if this is going to be a top 3 class like we've become accustomed to 4 years in a row, ESPN has named Alabama its national recruiting champion, or if it's going to be a class that's maybe around 9th, 10th, or 11th, is all going to be determined on what happens in the next few days. Do you see Alabama making this big push, getting commitments and signees from some of these 5 stars that are uncommitted and winding back up in that top 3?
Yes. I think worst case scenario, I was told, and Gary, trust me, it's been sleep when you can. I've been working the situation.
I know you
today.
have.
I've been told it will be a very good finish or an epic finish. And I think worst case scenario will be top 3, but I think should things fall the way they could fall, and I just got off the phone before I came on your show, I think it could be the number 1 class in the country still. I really do.
Wow. And I know the dominoes have to fall, beginning, of course, with Ben Davis and Lindell Mack Wilson here in state, possibly Jeffrey Simmons. We know all the big names are out there, but I want to ask you about a guy that in this day and age, it still amazes me that players with this type of ability and statistics can fly under the radar. But the running back out of McLean High School in the Tulsa area, Josh Jacobs, pretty much went unnoticed the entire season despite putting up monster numbers in a football hotbed with major Big 12 programs all around him. But here lately, and you were the first one to mention this guy to me, this young man is getting big-time attention, including Alabama. Burton Burns visited with him recently. Tell us about Josh Jacobs, how he managed to stay under the radar, and is he a real possibility for the Crimson Tide at running back?
Well, you know, he's a young man from McLean High School in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He's 5'10", 3/4", 197 pounds, and he's someone that had been recruited by Wyoming, had an offer from them, Tulsa. They in Missouri had found out about him, but Missouri really only knew about him about a week and a half ago. But they had kind of started jumping in on him. But then his film started circulating. He was basically only known inside the state of Oklahoma. He was his own read quarterback and had rushed for 5,000 career yards, 2,700 as a senior, 36 touchdowns. And then, his high school coach didn't really get his stats out too quickly, and his film was on Huddle, but again, it had not been circulated like some of these other guys. He only camped at North Texas. He didn't go to a bunch of the big combines. He's fully academically qualified, Gary, but I got to tell you, once this film got out, and Missouri found him, I got a phone call about him, and they got his film out to the University of Alabama. Made some calls to the coaching staff, and they watched this film, and they're still heavily involved with Devon Pennymon from Manville, Texas. But I strongly believe, Gary, that and right now Devon had a very good visit to Alabama last weekend, but he's scheduled to go to Ole Miss this weekend. He's been committed to Ole Miss for a long time, but his mother also likes Texas A&M quite a bit. All I'm going to say on the subject is, if Devon Pennymon does not go to Alabama, and right now I'm 90% sure he's not going to, based upon, Burton Burns went to see the young man this week, talked to his father, Marty. I believe on National Signing Day on Wednesday that Alabama needs another running back. They obviously have B.J. Emmons. I think he's going to be academically qualified. I strongly believe Joshua Jacobs is going to be in this class next Wednesday. Burton Burns loves his frame, loves his hands, loves everything about him physically after seeing him in person. And I know that Nick Saban has not, but all I will say on the subject is, Devon Pennymon is not signed on the dotted line with the University of Alabama, barring something miraculous, and a 180. That's not going to happen. The other running back in this class is going to be Joshua Jacobs. And in my opinion, and several other people that I respect that have watched the tape, he's a better prospect than Devon, who's very good, but this kid's special. And I think he's a guy that, a space player that's the perfect, replacement for Kenyon Drake. As you said, it's crazy in this day and time of social media and huddle film, but he kind of flew under the radar. But much like Mark Ingram, they found about a month before signing day. Eddie Jackson, they did this. This is an even smaller, window, but I really believe this kid is going to end up at Alabama in this class and could be a special player.
Drew DeArmond from 97.7 ESPN The Zone in Huntsville, host of Talking Ball, is bringing it this morning. I mean, really, really bringing it. All right, you mentioned that you thought this class would finish either very good or even possibly an epic finish. A lot of that's going to depend on how Alabama does in the state of Mississippi. And we know in recent years how difficult it has been to pull players out of there with Ole Miss and Mississippi State. But Alabama's battling for Jeffrey Simmons, the defensive end from Noxubee County. A.J. Brown, the outstanding receiver from Starkville. Scott Lashley, the offensive tackle from West Point. Nigel Knott, the defensive back from Germantown High School in Madison. And then the name escapes me, the defensive tackle at Starkville. Who is that, Drew? Jones. Kobe Jones. Can Alabama put together a big finish in Mississippi and get the guys that it wants from over in the Magnolia State?
Well, I think they can, Gary. I think they're going to get nice spots. He was in Tuscaloosa last night. He is slated to visit officially Oxford this weekend, but they feel really good about him. I've heard the last week that Alabama has got in strong with Scott Lashley, but Mississippi State is still there. But if Alabama, if the momentum continues to trend toward Alabama with Scott Lashley, I can tell you he's best friends with Jeffrey Simmons. So you can kind of start watching that situation. I know Alabama, it's going to be a battle with Simmons. Mississippi State's in there. I think it's still mainly Ole Miss and Alabama, and he's going to visit Ole Miss this coming weekend. They're very confident that they're going to get Simmons, but I think Alabama still likes where they are. And then, but I will say this: if they don't get Simmons, watch Kobe Jones because he's a very good player. As of right now, a lot of people think he's going to go to Mississippi State, but I know he had a very good visit to Alabama. Has always liked the Alabama coaching staff. Bo Davis likes him. So just if they do not get Simmons, watch that young man. And then, of course, A.J. Brown. He's been Alabama's top wide receiver on their board for a long, long time. He's going to visit Oxford this weekend. Most, still seem to think that it's Alabama or Mississippi State. I'm cautiously optimistic. If I had to pick right now, I would say A.J. Brown was going to Alabama. But again, you got to wait this out in Oxford, Mississippi. What happens on that official visit? But I really think they got a good shot at getting 3 or 4 of these guys and kind of, putting a shot across the bow to Ole Miss. But we'll see. And also with Mickey Juarez, the linebacker from Torrance, California, Ole Miss is involved with him, and so is UCLA. I think Alabama has a very good shot at him too. Nick Saban flying out and almost beating the parents back to California. So Ole Miss is going to have a very good class, Gary. But I'm not so sure that they're going to have the finish they believe. But again, this next weekend's coming. We'll see what happens. Terrell Hall will be in Oxford as well, and I think Alabama feels like they're in good position with Terrell Hall also. But it's going to be a heck of a next 48 hours to see how it all plays out. But I know the Alabama coaching staff is feeling pretty good right now.
Well, it is going to be a lot of fun. I mean, I'm looking forward to it. At the same time, I think guys like you and myself, and I know the coaches that work so hard are going to, have a collective sigh of relief come Wednesday night. But it is going to be fun, and I like your comment that Alabama's headed toward at least a very good and possibly epic finish in recruiting. Thank you, Drew.
Thank you, Gary. Always a pleasure being on with you.